Hello friends, and welcome back to a new video. In today's video, I wanted to go over 30 books that I want to read by the time I turn 30. I recently watched Morgan's video from Morgan's Endless Bookshelf where she gave a list of 30 books that she wants to read by the time she turns 30, and I thought it was a really good idea, and I started compiling a list. Getting this list down to 30 titles was such a challenge, and I did try to have the books on this list be books that I guess are more of a challenge. Not necessarily all of them, but they are definitely beloved and for good reason. A lot of these books have been on my TBR for a long time, and I just really want to get to them in the next few years. I did just turn 26, so I have 4 years to complete this challenge, 4 years to read these 30 books. And I don't know if I'll do any kind of updates throughout the next few years, but if I'm still on BookTube when I turn 30, I guess we can do like a follow-up video and see if I've read all of these books. I know Chantel and Anne both did a video like this similarly where they did 40 by 40, and I'll link all 3 of these lovely ladies videos down below. They are really fun to watch, and it's just really interesting to see what books everyone has on their own list. The majority of books on this list are classics, there's no surprise there, and one of them is a nonfiction, which even though I don't read a lot of nonfiction, it's one that I'm definitely really wanting to read. I'm very interested in the subject matter, and we'll start off with that book, the first book on the list, which is The Brontes, Wild Genius on the Moors, the Story of Three Sisters. And I just have the Goodreads page up here. It looks like this one is huge. I've heard from multiple people that it is very comprehensive, a very well written biography of the Bronte family. It looks like it's over 1,000 pages, so it's one that I really want to read. I find the Bronte family to be fascinating, Charlotte and Emily in particular. I'm so interested to learn more about them. My interest was really sparked when I read Elizabeth Gaskell's biography of Charlotte, and I wasn't a fan of everything about that book, but it definitely, you know, piqued my curiosity, and I want to learn more about the Bronte family. So the Brontes is definitely going to be a priority in terms of nonfiction in the next few years. So for the second item on the list, I am cheating a little bit because it is not one book, but it is a whole collection of plays. And I want to read the complete plays of William Shakespeare by the time I turn 30. I believe I have about 34 plays of his left to read. And so if I read them over the next 4 years, that's less than 10 plays a year. And I do think that's doable. I really do love Shakespeare. I just don't read enough of his plays. I love plays in general, but I'm always so intimidated before I go into a Shakespeare play. I am currently reading The Merchant of Venice and really enjoying it, and I don't really mind that it is a bit challenging reading his plays. The thing I love to do is listen to the play or watch an adaptation of the play while physically reading it as well. And so that's the plan for the next few years, is to read all of his plays and really enjoy my time along the way. I really hope I can get to all of them. I just need to challenge myself, and you know, even if I read a play a month, I think I'll be able to get them done in the next few years. So that is the goal, to read all of Shakespeare's plays. Next up, Les Mis by Victor Hugo. I did talk about this book in my Reluctant TBR tag video, and I talked a lot about why it's been taking me so long to read this. I've picked it up multiple times now and just haven't finished it, but I need to read this book, and I will read it by the time I turn 30. It is a French classic. It is a classic for a reason. Yes, it's a brick. It is intimidating, but I am very interested in this time period. I believe it starts around the Battle of Waterloo. I could be totally wrong, but I'm very interested, and the part of this book that I have read, I very much enjoyed. So this is a must. In the next few years, maybe 2025 will be the year, but I do want to read this by the time I turn 30 for sure. Next up is Middlemarch by George Eliot. I do want to read all of George Eliot's major works, but this is definitely at the top of the list. It's considered by many to be the best English novel ever written. Many people adore this book. It's very beloved, and I really want to read it. And I'm going to be starting this actually next month, so this will definitely be read by the time I turn 30, but it is a priority. I plan on reading it serially in the way that it was published. So I believe it was initially released in December of one year, and then the last volume was released in December of the following year. So it was just over a year for the entire story to be released, and I'm going to try to read it that way. I may end up reading it faster, I don't know, but that's the plan. So this is definitely a priority, and it will be read before I turn 30. Next is a book by one of my absolute favorite authors of all time. I'm talking about Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. Elizabeth Gaskell is my favorite female Victorian writer, and I just adore her so much. I loved her books Sylvia's Lovers, Ruth, and North and South so much. They're all 5-star reads. I adored them. And I did enjoy Mary Barton, although I don't remember too much about it, so I do want to reread it. But this is the last of her major full-length novels that I need to read. And I am so excited to read this. I'm hoping to read it in spring of 2025. So it will be read before I turn 30, and I cannot wait to get into it. I know I will love it. I just know. All I know about this story is there's romance and scandal and drama. And I've heard from some people that if you're into domestic novels, it's the novel for you. And so I know it's one that I will very much enjoy. I also know the main character's name is Molly, and that's about it. But I'm very excited to read this book. And I just hope I adore it as much as I think I will. Next up is an American classic that I need to read by the time I turn 30, and that is Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. All I know about this one is it's set with the backdrop of the American Civil War happening, and our main character is Scarlett O'Hara, and she's not a great person. That's about all I know. But I do really want to read this book. I've had it for a while now, and it's huge, but it's definitely very high up on my TBR. So this is one that I need to get to in the next few years. And next up, I have multiple books by one author, and although I have kind of a love-hate relationship with this author, I don't adore every single book I've read by him. I do still think he is an incredible writer and so worth your time, and I definitely want to finish the rest of his books. I'm talking about Charles Dickens, and next up on the list that I need to read is Little Dorrit. I'm hoping to read this in January, February. We'll see when I end up starting it, but this is next on the list. I am reading his works in chronological order, sort of. Next up is technically Hard Times. I read Bleak House earlier this year, and then Hard Times would have been next, but I've already read that one. So I'm going to be continuing in chronological order. Did I say chronological order? I meant publication order, but I'll be continuing in publication order. So Little Dorrit is next, and I've heard amazing things about it, so I'm very excited. I also know very little about these next books by Dickens. I know almost nothing about the plot or the characters, but I am very much looking forward to reading them. And after Little Dorrit, I believe, is Great Expectations, followed by A Tale of Two Cities. And then we have Our Mutual Friend, and I'm very excited to read this one, especially after hearing the way that Katie from Books and Things raves about this book, how much she adores it. I'm definitely very excited for this one. And then after Our Mutual Friend is, I believe, a book that Dickens never finished. I believe he passed away before he had a chance to finish it, and that is The Mystery of Edwin Drood. So those are the 5 books that I need to finish to have read all of Dickens' major works. And I'm very hopeful that I will finish them by the time I turn 30. Another favorite author that I want to read more from is Anthony Trollope, and in the next few years there are some books of his that I really want to read, starting with the Palliser series, and I have the first book here, Can You Forgive Her? I don't own the rest of the series, but I do plan on starting this series in 2025 after I've read a couple of his standalones. The Barsetshire series dealt more with church politics, whereas this series, I believe, deals more with Parliament and, you know, politics of the nation and everything. So I'm a little nervous about that, but I've heard amazing things about this series, and I believe some characters that were already introduced in the Barsetshire series are main characters in this series. So I'm very excited to see kind of how that will go. So like I said, Can You Forgive Her is the first book in the series, and then book 2 is Phineas Finn. Book 3 is the Eustace Diamonds. Book 4 is Phineas Redux. Book 5 is The Prime Minister, and book 6 is The Duke's Children. So I definitely want to read all 6 books in the series before I turn 30. And I would also like to read The Way We Live Now. This is considered by many to be one of Trollope's best works. It's quite thick as well, but I've heard nothing but good things. And I remember Mitzi from Mitzi Reads and Writes, she mentioned that when she read this, she was thinking this is a Miriam book, and that made me very excited. So I'm very much looking forward to reading this book. It is definitely a priority. It says it's a satire of the literary world of 19th century London and a bold indictment of the new power of speculative finance in English life. And it looks like it has a huge cast of characters, and I love books like that. So I'm very excited. Another Trollope I want to read is Ralph the Heir, and I do plan on buddy reading this with my friend Elizabeth very soon. So that's next on the list. And I believe this book has to do with inheritance and issues of inheritance and everything, which was huge in the Victorian era, and I've heard nothing but praise for it as well. So I'm very excited. And then the last one by Anthony Trollope on the list is The Belton Estate, and I'm so excited about this one. This one is beautifully illustrated. It is a folio edition, but I found it at a used bookstore for such an amazing price and was so excited. All folio editions are so expensive, so when I found this, I was so excited. But I'm also very excited for this story. I've heard amazing things about it as well. It says it's concerned with the plight of unmarried, impecunious women in the 19th century, a novel rich in psychological insights. It's a love story, but one of unusual proportions in a Trollope novel. So I'm very excited. Next up is a classic. It is a nonfiction classic that I must read by the time I turn 30. I've been putting it off for too long. I'm talking about Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. This book is a must. It says the book brings together C.S. Lewis's legendary broadcast talks of the war years, talks in which he set out simply to explain and defend the belief that has been common to nearly all Christians at all times. Rejecting the boundaries that divide Christianity's many denominations, Lewis provides an unequaled opportunity for believers and non-believers alike to hear a powerful, rational case for the Christian faith. I honestly have nothing else to say other than this is a must-read. I need to read this. I've been putting it off for way too long. Next up is a book that I've had for quite some time now, and it's just been sitting on my shelves looking beautiful because it's a beautiful edition, but I've been way too intimidated to pick it up. But that must change. I really want to read this book because I'm so interested in the subject matter. I'm talking about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. I need to read this book. I have always been really interested and very curious about Arthurian legend. I think what sparked it was Anne Shirley as she's walking through the woods in the miniseries. As I was growing up and watching it, I was so intrigued by the poem that she read, which is of course The Lady of Shalott by Tennyson. And I just love that poem so much. And I started reading more Tennyson in the last year and I'm falling in love. And some of his poems are Arthurian. And I just find it so fascinating. I love anything Arthurian. I find it so interesting. So I need to read the source material. I need to read this book. It's quite large. And what I do like though is this one, it looks like the translation isn't too hard to read. This edition is just stunning. I also found this at a thrift store and was so excited about that. It also has some illustrations there and many different stories that are all Arthurian legend. So I just really want to read this. So hopefully by the time I turn 30, I will. I did mention reading some of Tennyson's poetry. So next on the list is Idylls of the King by Tennyson. It says written in the middle of his career, Idylls of the King is Tennyson's longest and most ambitious work. It is Arthurian, of course, and it says, the Idylls embodied the universal and unending war between sense and soul, and Arthur the highest ideals of manhood and kingship, an attitude totally compatible with the moral outlook of his age. And it looks like this is just a large Arthurian epic poem, and I'm so excited and really want to read it before I turn 30. Next up is a book that absolutely terrifies me, but I just have this itch to read it. I really want to read it. I do love poetry. I'm very interested in epic poetry. And so I really need to read this book. I'm talking about the Iliad by Homer. I am so intimidated by it, but I want to read it. I actually started a course. I'm kind of doing my own little DIY literature degree inspired by Chantel from Chantel Reads All Day. She's doing her own thing and I just find it so fun and interesting. And what I'm doing is starting very slow with just some online courses that are completely free. And so I started this course online. It's free. It's through Hillsdale College and it is, I believe, something along the lines of Ancients to the Middle Ages, like Literature 101 from the ancient period to the Middle Ages. And the first book to read on the list is the Iliad. So that's why I bought this book. I'm very nervous, but also excited at the same time. So it will be read before I turn 30. It will be read in 2025. That's the plan. And we'll go from there, but I'm nervous. I'm excited, but I'm nervous. So next up, we have two books by another favorite Victorian author, Charlotte Mary Yonge. The next book is The Pillars of the House. I know very little about this book other than it's one of Charlotte Mary Yonge's best, and it is very domestic and just a long sweeping story, my kind of story, and I need to read it. And then there's also Countess Kate, and I don't know too much about this one either. I have heard it's more, I guess, juvenile in a way, in tone maybe, and that the main character is kind of reminiscent of Anne of Green Gables. So I'm very interested and love Charlotte Mary Yonge, and I'm very excited to read more from her in the next few years. Next up is The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. I have read East of Eden by him and loved it and want to read more, and I've heard great things about The Grapes of Wrath. I believe it's set during the Great Depression, like the Dust Bowl era, and it just sounds so interesting. It says it's a portrait of the conflict between the powerful and powerless, of one man's fierce reaction to injustice and of one woman's stoical strength The novel captures the horrors of the Great Depression and probes into the very nature of equality and justice in America. It's a story of an Oklahoma family, the Joads, who are driven off their homestead and forced to travel west to the promised land of California. Out of their trials and repeated collisions against the hard realities of an America divided into haves and have-nots, evolves a drama that's intensely human, yet majestic in its scale and moral vision. Elemental, yet plain-spoken, tragic, but ultimately stirring in its human dignity. I am so interested in this book. That is definitely a priority to read in the next few years. And then next up is the complete Brambly Hedge stories. I absolutely adore Beatrix Potter and her world of Peter Rabbit. And I've heard that if you love Peter Rabbit, Brambly Hedge is a must read. And this collection is by Jill Barklem. It just sounds so cozy. It says it was first published, I believe, in the 80s, and ever since, readers have loved exploring the miniature world of the hedgerow and meeting the families that live there. In this collection, the mice have many adventures, but they always have time for fun and relaxation too. Whatever the season, and whether they are by the sea, in the high hills, or simply at home by the fire, there is always someone ready to lend a helping hand. I just need more of that whimsy that comes with reading stories like Peter Rabbit, and I just need to read Brambly Hedge. I really need to read these stories, so I'm very excited. Next up is Jane of Lantern Hill by L.M. Montgomery. There are definitely some more L.M. Montgomery books that could have made this list, but out of all of them, this is definitely one that I want to prioritize and really want to read very soon. And I love Ella Montgomery so much. She never disappoints, so I'm very excited. This one says, for as long as she could remember, Jane Stewart and her mother lived with her grandmother in a dreary mansion in Toronto. Jane always believed her father was dead, until she accidentally learns he's still alive and well and living on Prince Edward Island. When Jane spends the summer at his cottage on Lantern Island, doing all the wonderful things grandmother deems unladylike, she dares to dream that there could be such a house back in Toronto. A house where she, mother, and father could live together without grandmother directing their lives. A house that could be called home. I think I'm going to love this book, and I'm very excited to read it. And last but not least, I have 3 books that are technically one book, so I'm counting them as one. And I have read the first part, so I am cheating a little bit, but I am still counting all of this as one. I'm talking about the Lord of the Rings. I have read The Fellowship of the Ring a few years ago, loved it, just haven't continued with the books. And they are classics for a reason. They're classic fantasy novels for a reason. I love The Hobbit. I loved The Fellowship of the Ring. I love all things Middle Earth. I just haven't finished the series or book. I guess it's one long book, but I haven't finished it yet. So this needs to be read by the time I turn 30. It is a priority. It is definitely near the top of my list, and I'm going to reread The Fellowship of the Ring before I continue. Book 2 is The Two Towers, and then book 3 is The Return of the King in my mismatched thrifted editions, but it is a must. I must read these books before I turn 30. It has to happen, or I will be very disappointed. But those are the books on my list. Those are the 30 books that I really want to read by the time I turn 30. Like I was saying, it was very hard to make this list. I could have easily had 50 plus on the list of books that I really want to prioritize, but these are 30 that I narrowed the list down to. I would love to know your list if you have a big birthday coming up, whether it's 30, 40, etc. I'd love to know some of the books that you would have on your list. Obviously, you don't need to put all of them in the comments, but I'd love to know what are some books on your list that you need to read in the next few years that are definite priorities, and you've maybe had them sitting on your shelves for too long and you just need to get them read. I would love to know. But that's it for this video, friends. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.